Some of you might remember that last year I posted a video covering my first complimentary upgrade on a Swiss Air flight from Sao Paulo to Buenos Aires. It was really fun considering how frequently I've been wanting to try out that product. However, on such a short flight, I felt that I didn't really get the full story of that business class. So today we're in San Francisco, getting on board one of their long-haul flights in business class out to Zurich. Now, without surprise, Swiss Air uses the international terminal at San Francisco's airport, which has two separate wings. Historically, one was for United and their Star Alliance partners, and the other was for pretty much everyone else. However, with United's growth at SFO, they've been putting more and more Star Alliance carriers in the A gates as opposed to the G gates. Lufthansa Group airlines still remain in the G gates as they are some of the closest partners with United, however. So after a short check-in, we were off to the G gates. Our first stop, however, is of course the United Polaris Lounge, immediately through security and to the right. Those of you familiar with the Polaris Lounge know that you cannot get access with status alone, instead having to be on a Star Alliance business or first class ticket on a transoceanic flight. Now, I mentioned earlier that some of those Star Alliance carriers have moved to the A gates. Unfortunately, with no connection at this time, that means if you would like to access the Polaris Lounge, you're going to have to clear security to go to the lounge, then leave security, and then clear it again on the other side of the terminal. At one point rated the world's best business class lounge, it has now been downgraded to the US's best business class lounge, but the United Polaris Lounge here in San Francisco is massive. The downstairs area having some workspaces in addition to the shower suites and the quiet rooms, the upstairs area being most of the dining options, separated into multiple different areas. One of my favorite areas in the lounge is known as the studio. Immediately up the escalators and to the left you come across this room off to the side that does have some seating and some more quick grab snacks as opposed to the main buffet or sit down dining options. But if you just want a little something and more quiet of a space in this lounge, this is where you're going to want to hang out. In addition, you have some great views of the terminals and the ramp and departing aircraft from here. Speaking of which, it was the first spot where we saw our view of our 777 that would be taking us across the Atlantic to Zurich. As we walk down the hallway on the upper level here, we see an assortment of seating, some for groups and some for solo travelers. One of the things that lounges get right is providing seating and hangout opportunities for people of all groups. We also see the main bar before we reach the main buffet area. They have the buffet and the sit-down dining option here in the Polaris lounges. One of the great touches is especially the sit-down dining options are free, included in the cost of your ticket. Call me crazy or whatever you want, but you know me, the favorite part of the Polaris lounge is the roof on the bathroom hallway. I ended up just going to the main buffet, getting some few light snacks, considering we'd be getting some dinner shortly after departure in a matter of a couple hours. Enjoyed the view of the ramp before it was time to head out to my boarding gate. Now, if you watch my channel, whether you've picked up on it or not, typically I like to fly airlines from their main hubs, considering they usually have the best flagship areas, the biggest check-in, the biggest lounges, and you get to really see everything that they put into that airline. However, since I do have plans to fly Swiss Air a little bit more out of Zurich, I figured it would be okay for me to start this one from San Francisco, as I really just wanted to try out their transatlantic services, considering the only time that I had flown them previously was on that short 2-hour flight with very truncated services. Gulf 13 was our gate today at the far end of the hallway, and while we still had just a little bit of time here before boarding, I decided to check out my favorite thing here at the San Francisco International Terminal directly above my boarding gate, the outdoor terrace. Especially with this gate being mine today, we had a wonderful view of our Swiss 777 that would shortly be taking us across the ocean. And now as we wait to board our 777, a little bit about what is known as the Lufthansa Group. Now, a lot of you guys know Lufthansa as the German airline, one of the largest in Europe. As a matter of fact, I believe it still sits at number 2 in passengers carried within the EU. Now, the Lufthansa Group actually owns a number of airlines such as Lufthansa, Swiss, Brussels, Austrian, and a couple others as well. Essentially making it so that even though they are separate airlines, they are all managed by one governing body. They do work very closely in joint ventures with United Airlines and Air Canada for their transatlantic services, as well as a couple services through Japan. Now, when I need to escape reality, I travel. But do you know what's even better of a kind of therapy than escaping to the other side of the world? Using the sponsor of today's video, BetterHelp. Now, therapy can be kind of a taboo topic for some people, but BetterHelp makes it super easy and customizable. And with this video's offer, use my link down below, betterhelp.com/PatrickShea, to get 10% off your first month of their services to try it out. What are these services, you ask? Well, the first thing you'll get is a questionnaire where you can personalize what you're looking for help with, what kind of therapist you want, how you'd like to communicate with that therapist, and if you aren't sure about any of that, give them whatever information you can, and they'll help match you with one of their over 30,000 therapists that match your situation the best within 48 hours in most cases. Once you're set up, it becomes super easy to schedule a session at the time that works best for you, and if you feel like the therapist assigned to you isn't the correct fit, you can easily switch to someone else for no additional cost. So don't just escape your problems by traveling to random corners of the globe. Instead, use my link down below, betterhelp.com/PatrickShea, to get 10% off your first month of therapy with a licensed professional specific to your needs, to get your mind in the best shape possible. Just like the other 4 million people who did, now living healthier and happier. And now off to this iconic aircraft. Peace. Other than that, though, as we finally reach our airplane after walking past the jet bridge exclusively for the first class passengers, and we reach the jet bridge pretty much for everyone else, it's time to get on board this Swiss 777. And I do have to say, the galley welcoming you is fantastic. With the little decorations on either side, in addition to the slight red mood lighting, it was a great welcome to this cabin before making the right turn and entering the business class cabin. Now, Swiss's business class does alternate on the window side between a 1-seat or 2-seat configuration. If you are looking to get one of these 1-seat configurations like I had today, it is a slightly more expensive of a cost than what you would pay for the other seats on top of the normal business class fare. Looking around this seat, however, starting with the headrest, which was slightly adjustable and had the headrest decoration with the Swiss logo on it. The seat was supplied with a pillow as well as a light blanket. On the left side, the side closest to the aisle, if you're in the K seats, you're going to find a nice little mood lighting, in addition to this little hook here that holds not only the headphones but also a hanger. So if you came on board with a jacket, the crew can stash that for you in flight, and shortly before landing they came back through the cabin to redistribute those jackets to the passengers who had given them to them. You'll also up here find a headset jack and a little reading light that can be swiveled. There's also this little tab here, which I believe was just for holding little reading documents in flight. Each seat came supplied with a water bottle holder with a water bottle in it for each passenger. The flap in front of the water bottle houses the seatback TV remote, which is a nice style. As you know, I like these ones that have the screen on them that can be used to monitor the map while you watch a program on the seatback TV. In addition, we also have some seat controls. In addition to the ones just in front of it, we also have these ones inside the flap to control the quality of the seat, not necessarily move the seat itself. If you're trying to move the seat, you'll want to reference the buttons in front of the flap, which can move the leg rest individually or progress you to a lie flat position. The dining table actually comes out with a push of a button, slides out of that little whatever you want to call it on the side counter before folding out all the way to a fairly nice size. The countertop directly in front of that is actually a fairly nice space, especially considering we have one on both sides. Makes it so you have plenty of space to work, eat, and even more. Now, these solo throne seats really excel at storage. As you can see, there's a little tray here that pulls out of that console to store extra things, and obviously is fully enclosed once it slides back in. You'll also find a universal charging port and USB charging port on the front of that counter. In front of that is where we found the literature pocket in addition to the in-flight shopping cart. And next to that was a little coat hook that pulled out for anything that you wanted to keep at your seat. In front of you, you can see just how much space you have in addition to that seatback TV. We will take a little bit more of a look at that once we get in flight. Below the TV, a little more space for storage. I mostly kept chargers in here since it wasn't exactly the largest storage in the world. Below the TV is where you have your footrest as well as a little incline ledge, which is nice for resting your feet on. However, there's not enough space to store a full backpack, although as we've seen, there's plenty of space to store other things. On the other side of the TV is another coat hook for those of you who decided for whatever reason to wear 2 coats on your flight today. The right side of the seat contains another even larger counter space for anything you might need space for. Underneath that was where they had some in-seat storage. You can see here this door slides up and down so that you can access each compartment one at a time. As far as the non-enclosed storage goes, for things you might need easier access to in flight, you can see here this little shelf unit on the window side of the counter. As far as the amenities, I started with the hibiscus drink. Usually I go with the champagne, however the hibiscus drink was a nice change of pace. Looking through the amenity kit, which was more of an amenity tin if anything. Not exactly the most lush of the amenity kits that I've received, however it did at least include the basics you would need for a flight of this length. Then of course the bedding, starting off with the pillow that was at the seat. I did actually find the pillow to be pretty good. I didn't have to supplement it with anything else. The blanket, however, was fairly thin. However, with no overhead air vents, the cabin was pretty warm, and as a matter of fact, I ended up only being able to sleep without any blanket at all. Otherwise, I got a little too hot. The bag with the headsets also includes this donation slip. I find it nice for getting rid of foreign currency that you won't use once you get back home. There was also, of course, the headphones. Extremely basic, noise cancelling, not the most comfortable. Then there was 2 menus and a little pen. The menus were separated by the main menu and the breakfast menu. We were given 2 meals on this flight, so essentially 1 menu per meal. The first one was obviously going to be our dinner shortly after departure. After a couple pages of short welcoming, we were given the main course and first course options scattered on the first 2 pages, then onto the drink options where we were first given the wine menus and then some of the non-alcoholic options on board. Now the breakfast menu was interesting because it was more of just a card, and it's really why they gave us the pen with the menus. As you can see here, there's a whole bunch of options for what you want with your meal to drink, to eat, if you want to skip it, your seat number, and any other personal things you'd like with that. They collected these cards and it made it easier for them to serve the breakfast without having to come through the cabin and totally brighten up the cabin. A great idea that I really think more airlines should implement. Now as the safety video played and we began our pushback and taxi out to 28 left for departure to Zurich, it was time to talk a little bit about the upcoming renovations to the Swissair cabin. Now I'll start off by saying that Swissair was a major bucket list item for me. I definitely wanted to try out their business class and especially their first class ever since I first learned about it probably 10-15 years ago. I thought that it looked fantastic and I was really excited to see what the product was. So when I got that free upgrade last year on that short 2-hour hop, I was extremely excited even if it was going to be a truncated service. So I had to try out on this long haul service, and I will say that you'll see throughout the video the cabin is starting to show its age a bit. However, Swiss has announced renovations coming to their cabins. In 2025, it looks like they will have fully refurbished first, business, premium economy, and economy class cabins on their long haul fleet, in addition to the A350s that they'll be acquiring with the same setup. Just based on the pictures I've seen for what it might look like, it looks like it will be another fantastic product offered by Swiss, and when the time comes around to try that out, you know that I'll be there in line. Now, shortly after departure, I started a movie which was cut off a few minutes into it to play this advertisement. I'm not kidding you when I say that there was probably about 10 to 15 minutes of uninterrupted advertisements before we could access the in-flight entertainment. Probably about 45 minutes after departure, it was time for us to get set up for our first meal service. This would be a dinner type service. They came through the cabin first to take our drink orders. I decided to start with a nice Swiss beer. I was a little bummed out to see that Swiss Air still goes with the full one tray service with the appetizer and the main course all on the same plate. That being said, I decided to go with the halibut carpaccio first course, which was pretty tasty, along with the pan-seared shrimp with a Cajun sauce, steamed rice, scallion, and grilled baby zucchini. Not as good as the halibut starter, but not the worst thing I've had on board an airplane at least. We were also given a plate with 2 different types of cheeses and some grapes to go along with the bread choices. And of course, gotta check up on the inscribed silverware where we see the Swiss Air logo on the back of each piece of silverware. Our dessert was titled Red Fruits Charlotte on the menu. Not quite sure what that is, but there was a lot of fruit and it was really tasty. I ended my meal service with one of my favorite teas ever, the Rooibos Vanilla, in a different brand than I usually try. As everyone wrapped up their meal and got ready to settle in for the flight, I wanted to take a moment to look through the in-flight entertainment options available on Swiss's in-flight network. The selection of items obviously starting off fairly basic with movies and TV, along with some stuff about Switzerland itself, things about your aircraft and flight itself, and then a kids section with games followed on the second page. Starting of course with the movies, where currently they were featuring Robert De Niro. However, they had plenty of other genres, all with a large number of movies. I usually use the comedy section as kind of a control group to gauge how wide of a selection each airline has, and Swiss had plenty of selections from all around the world. The TV selection was admittedly smaller, however it did have plenty of the American classics at the very least. Not just that, but within each selection they had full seasons of different shows. Then was the music section, which came with music, podcasts, and audiobooks, all of different genres. The Made in Switzerland section has movies, TV shows, and audio specifically from Switzerland and Swiss artists. A nice little touch for those people wanting a little bit of an introduction to where they might be going on vacation. The My Flight section mostly just had the Air Show, which was the name they used for the in-flight map. Once open, it was fully customizable. You could move the map around, you could also choose different views, look at the full information of your flight, and one of my favorite features on some of these in-flight TVs is being able to pretty much get information on any big city in the world, including some of its top hits and tourist attractions and statistics. The other thing in the My Flight section was the About Swiss, where you could read or watch a little bit about Swiss International Airlines. Then was the kids section, of course with movies, TV, audio, and games specifically for kids, but also a map feature specifically for kids titled Are We There Yet? Swiss does put Wi-Fi on their long-haul airplanes, and I'm not sure if it was just this specific airplane, but I did have some issues with it being somewhat slow. However, still grateful to have it nonetheless. Once connecting to it, however, you get to the home page on Safari or whatever internet browser you use, where you can choose from a number of different services to purchase. They have free messaging for those people using iMessage or WhatsApp. You can connect for 4 hours for the equivalent of about $28 or the full flight for about $40. Extremely expensive by industry standards, although I am curious if they'll be shifting towards free Wi-Fi just like everyone else. Still grateful to see a full flight option nonetheless. Then it was time to get ready for bed and explore the different seat modes available to us. We can see starting off here, of course, in the fully seated mode, still with the pillow that I used as extra lumbar support. From there, however, we can use the shortcut for the relaxed position where the seat progresses through whatever it needs in order to get itself into that comfortable relaxed position that I use mostly for sitting around and watching TV. From there, however, we still have one more mode, that is the fully lie-flat mode. Holding that down once again, it gets itself into the fully lie-flat position. Once flat, you can see here it gets flush with the footrest underneath the TV, and then it was time to start dressing it up with the bedding we were given. Starting, of course, with the pillow that I was using as lumbar support, that will move to the headrest. Like I mentioned, it's a nice size and firmness, however you can see the headrest here is kind of tight, squeezed between the 2 seats behind me, so I moved it forward a little bit, otherwise it just gets kind of wedged. Then the blanket. I mentioned it wasn't exactly the thickest blanket in the world, but it was at least large enough to cover my entire body. Although, like I mentioned, I did eventually kick it off and ended up sleeping without it just because I found the cabin to be a bit too warm. Now, the biggest problem with the throne seats in these lie-flat situations is the foot space that you have. Considering with the 1-2-1 setup, it has to be squeezed between the two seats in front of you. This means that you don't have a ton of space for your feet, and you pretty much have to sleep on your back so that your feet can stick straight up and down, because there's not really any way you're fitting them if you try to sleep on your side. Even still, with your feet straight up and down, there's not a whole lot of space, so just keep that in mind. With that though, I turned off the mood lighting in my suite, the light over my shoulder and the light down in the footwell, and it was time for me to get some sleep. Good morning everyone. We're a few hours from Zurich. I stashed my shoes down below before lowering the partition and packing up my bedding and putting that up above. It was time to get comfortable in my seat, maybe watch another movie or a couple TV shows before arrival. I first wanted to explore the lavatory, and I think that Swiss really has some nice finishings throughout their lavatory. Not just that plain white box that I reference a lot of time with the black counters, the nice oversized sink, and the fake wood paneling on the front of the countertop. It's also nice to see some amenities here, considering the amenity kit itself was fairly light. It's good to be able to have them here, although I do tend to use the amenity kits as some of my amenities throughout my trip. While I was up and we were still just barely entering Europe, entering Ireland airspace, it was time for me to explore the galley and stretch a little bit before sitting down, where they promptly brought breakfast service within another half hour to 45 minutes, shortly before our arrival into Zurich. Now, as mentioned, that breakfast card was a great touch. Some people decided to sleep through breakfast. However, I was happily enjoying my coffee before they shortly brought me the rest of my food. Now, on the breakfast card, you were able to check multiple boxes, so I was able to fully customize my breakfast, ending up with a glass of grapefruit juice and a nice hot coffee. To go along with that was a croissant and a Dutch pastry, a plain yogurt, a cup of fresh fruit, and then I decided to go with the English breakfast over the Swiss breakfast, as the omelet and egg sounded a little bit better than cold cuts and cheese. And you can see here, not that I even needed this much space, as I don't think anyone really does, but you can see just how much you're truly able to spread out in these seats. Got to enjoy a mid-breakfast flight over London, where from the aircraft we could see not only Heathrow down below us, but also the city of London as we made our way towards mainland Europe. And lastly, before we began our descent into Zurich, one of the greatest things to cap off any Swiss flight is the passing out of these little Swiss milk chocolates. Before long, however, we began our descent into Switzerland. The Swiss countryside was beautiful, not as beautiful as the Alps, although we really only got a view of them from the distance as we arrived from the north. Still though, sit back, relax, and enjoy our arrival into Zurich. Welcome to Zurich, where the local time is sometime the next day. I hope you enjoyed this flight on Swiss out to their main Swiss hub. As we make our way to the gate, it's time for our final thoughts on the product. First things first, I'm not gonna lie, it was great being able to finally try out this product on one of their true long-haul flights with the full service. I think the seats are great, especially the throne seat options, although it's a slight bummer that they come at an extra cost of over $100. That being said, they are a great way to spend a 10 to 12 hour flight. There was enough storage for multiple people, and the countertops on either side made them far more private than the two-person seat setups. The staff was also great. I've noticed that Swiss crews tend to be a bit older. Maybe it's just what I got on my few flights, or maybe it's the routes I'm flying on, but they were all super nice. I'll also say that so far, I have to say that Swiss also has one of the best economy classes I've ever had in my travels, so comparing it to this experience was very important to me. Besides the seat, the product offerings are the other biggest thing that people expect when paying for premium classes. I have to say that Swiss's offerings leave plenty of room for improvement. I found the meals to be a bit bland, although I will say that the breakfast card was incredible and made it so that they could spend less time in the aisles for those who wanted to get a bit more sleep without the disruption. I wouldn't mind more airlines getting on board with this idea. I also found the amenity kits to be a bit basic, although I was grateful to at least have amenities in the lavatory, just meant that I lacked a little bit extra amenities on my trip. And lastly, the seats are beginning to show some age as their style becomes slowly more outdated and they become a bit more worn in. This is why I'm so excited for the arrival of Swiss's new aircraft and cabins scheduled to arrive in 2025. This should no doubt bring the much more elevated standard to Swiss that they need to remain competitive, and is coming at the perfect time, and I cannot wait to try it out. Unfortunately, the Swiss Arrivals Lounge was closed by the time we cleared immigration and baggage claim. Instead, however, I was happy to go check out the Circle, as they call it. Right across the street from the main terminal, it's basically a big shopping mall with hotels, restaurants, shops, and offices all right on airport property. I actually stayed the night here before my flight the next morning to Cairo and enjoyed the ambiance that just can't be matched by many US airports of this size. What I do want to talk about as one of my last thoughts here is that the US to Europe market is obviously one of the world's most lucrative, and over the years it seems that the airlines serving these routes have seriously struggled to keep up with the growth of the Asian and Gulf carriers, as those carriers brought brand new cabins, better in-flight products, airport experience, and even their route structure. It seemed that the US and European airlines that previously were the world's leading airlines began to fall from their glory. I'm excited to see that this seems to be changing, however, as North American carriers like Delta and United have made huge leaps to improving their long-haul services, and now European carriers like Lufthansa and Swiss have announced major overhauls of their own. In a few years' time, it'll be great to see just how much of the glory is restored to these airlines and routes operating between North America and Europe, and see if they ever truly do compare to that of the Asian and Middle East carriers. That's all for this week though, however, and so until next Sunday, safe travels, and I'll see y'all next time.